14º Congresso Internacional de Jornalismo Investigativo da Abraji.
Para quem não me conhece, sou o Daniel Bramati, eu sou o cara que está mandando mensagem para todo mundo aí pelo aplicativo. Quem não instalou o aplicativo, peço que o faça, porque ele está sendo o principal meio de comunicação aqui do pessoal. E também vai ser usado para mandar perguntas do público para a Ângela Pimenta mais tarde, quando tiver aqui a conversa entre a Ângela e a Claire. Há um ano, nós estávamos aqui, nós no plural majestático, estava eu aqui, apresentando a proposta do Comprova 1 para uma plateia. Muitas caras estão aqui de novo. E a gente estava diante de um desafio enorme, uma eleição, uma campanha eleitoral estava por vir, e um grande risco de que o ambiente político fosse contaminado pela desinformação. Esse risco, viu-se mais tarde, era muito palpável e se efetivou, né? O quadro de disseminação de boatos, rumores, falsidades foi algo impressionante e é muito difícil medir isso, mas todo mundo acha, todo mundo tem condições de perceber que algum impacto no resultado eleitoral teve. Quando a gente lançou o Comprova 1, o desafio, então, era de reunir uma coalizão de veículos inédita, a maior coalizão de veículos da história da imprensa brasileira em se tratando de veículos concorrentes, trabalhando num projeto comum, com a coordenação da Abraji e com a metodologia que nos trouxe o First Draft da Claire Wardle. Foi um desafio muito grande para todo mundo, mas todo mundo que participou desse projeto saiu muito maior, eu tenho certeza. Foi, assim como foi um desafio enorme, foi algo muito gratificante. Foi uma experiência incrível. Todo mundo aprendeu muito sobre o fenômeno da desinformação e, por isso mesmo, a gente acha que isso não deve ficar só no passado. A gente vai manter o Comprova vivo, a gente vai lançar o Comprova 2, vocês vão ter mais informações sobre isso aqui no final. E, no meio de tantas coisas boas que envolveram esse projeto, uma das melhores foi estreitar as nossas relações com a maravilhosa Claire Wardle, que é uma grande amiga do Brasil, está vindo pela 6ª vez em pouco mais de um ano ao Brasil, 6th time. Está quase falando português. Not yet. E eu vou passar a palavra para ela, ela vai fazer uma apresentação aqui sobre o tema da desinformação e depois a gente vai fazer um debate com todos vocês participando. Com vocês, Claire Wardle.
Thank you. It's such a pleasure to be back here again. When Daniel asked me, I said, but I was here last year. And he said, oh, we want you to come back. And I was just thinking as I stood here, I have a funny story for you. So last year, exactly, I was standing on this stage and I announced Comprova. And the next day, I got a taxi to Sao Paulo airport, which, as you know, on a Friday, takes about 2.5 hours to get there. And by the time I got there, I was so desperate to get home. And I went to check in and they said, no, you have to go and see this person. I stood in line for half an hour to see that person who said, no, your visa is run out. You can't return home to the US, where I live in New York. And I was so tired, I burst into tears. And I said, I was here launching a project for the Brazilian people about the election. And the man behind the desk said, what, Comprova? And I was like, yes. So I just love this country so much, and you give me, even when I'm crying, you give me so much. So I'm very excited to be back here to basically talk about what we learned in this incredible project that really was the largest of its kind in the world, under really challenging circumstances. We did something magic, and I'm going to talk to you a bit today about that magic. So I'm from First Draft, and we're an organization that was founded in 2015 with the help of Google News Lab, as it was then, just as a training site to help journalists in the verification of material on the social web. We were just a training site. But then in 2016, we decided that we wanted to start doing projects to learn from the field, learn by doing. And Comprova is an example of that. It's a form of throwing spaghetti at the wall to see what sticks. And with Comprova, quite a lot of the spaghetti stuck, so that's good. And for those of you who haven't seen, this is a highlights document of a 20,000-word report. But I love journalists, but journalists do not want to read 20,000 words. But if you do, the longer version will be up on our website next week. We're still translating because it was so long. But we have both the English and Portuguese versions of the highlights. And I'm going to go through those highlights today. And I'd like to say thank you to Google and Facebook, who both supported this project. And specifically Marco, who I said, can you help pay for the printing? So yes, so a shout out to Marco for saying yes when we had run out of money. So I think many of you know, but very quickly, what was Comprova? It was a collaborative journalism project. And one thing I want to stress is many people today say things are collaborative, but often they don't really mean collaborative. This was collaborative as in journalists working together to write stories together. This wasn't a central newsroom that sent out stories that other newsrooms published. This was actually working together, and that was what made it so difficult, but also what made it so magic. Oh, Claire, get a grip. So we had 24 different newsrooms working together, and the idea was if you could have different types of newsrooms, print, digital, radio, TV, from the left and the right, from across Brazil, would that make audiences more trusting of the journalism? So that was the hypothesis. Were we helping audiences by working together? And so the model had come from France, where we did a similar project during the French election, and we had a number of French newsrooms working together. And this was our cross-check site. This was a story about the Emmanuel Macron leaks 2 days before the election. And you can see some of the French newsrooms that worked together there. And so the challenge was, could we bring this model to Brazil? And many people said, no, you're a crazy lady. The Brazilians are very competitive. It will not work in Brazil. And I was like, I'm going to make it work, if it kills me. So this was the evaluation of the French project, and we did find evidence that audiences thought it was more credible, and we also found that it made a big difference in terms of journalistic skills. More French journalists developed these skills of verifying, particularly video and photo. And it also increased traffic to the cross-check content, because anybody in the room who is an editor or a manager will say, that collaboration site sounds nice, but unless you can provide a way to make me money, why am I going to do it? So we also have to be realistic in this current moment, the journalistic climate. And this is a picture of our French boot camp, where we took our French journalists to a chateau, and they stood around drinking wine. Very elegant. Ooh la la. This is the Brazilian boot camp. And that sort of, for me, sums up the two projects, and secretly why I love Brazil so much. But the secret to these projects is building trust among a community who haven't necessarily worked together. So the reason that we have these moments is to train, but more importantly, to build trust. And that's what happened at both of these events. Now, I don't expect you to read this, but this is the workflow. This wasn't easy to come up with. We had to be clear about how this journalistic process would work. We had to have clear guidelines. This was a non-partisan project. We had to make sure everybody had signed up to the principles, everybody understood what it meant to be part of Comprova, that you couldn't scoop. What's that in Brazilian Portuguese? El scoop, no? That if you saw something on Comprova, you couldn't run off and publish it on your site first. We had to have strict rules to ensure that it would work. We had a governing council, but the truth is, we didn't have one argument during the 12 weeks. When I give this talk in America, people say, well, nobody would do this. And I say, they did do it, and there was no arguments. There was some deep discussions, but no arguments. So this was the site. Hopefully many of you saw it. It wasn't very beautiful. It was built very quickly. But we didn't actually want many people to go to this site. We wanted people to go to the partner websites. We wanted them to go to the partner TV broadcasts. But as you can see, when you see competing logos at the bottom of a story, the first time I saw this, I got a little bit teary. Like, there's something so powerful about this process of cross-checking. These stories didn't go up unless 3 other newsrooms said that they agreed with the reporting, and often there were more newsrooms that did that. And what that meant was the quality of the reporting improved. There wasn't one mistake in 12 weeks, and I think that's partly because newsrooms don't want to look stupid against their competitors. You are held accountable not just by your editor, but by your competitors. And for that reason, it slowed the process down, and there were no corrections in the whole time we worked together. So here's an example of Comprova content on Band. Here's Comprova content on Estado. And this is my favorite. This is Comprova content printed out in a newspaper. My goodness. This was my absolute favorite. But it also made me go, oh, I wish we had better designers. Anyway, next time. So I want to show you Comprova by numbers. I'm not sure you can see this. It's easier if you can see it if you're holding one of these. But this is the main number I want you to look at. As a coalition, we published 146 stories, but that led to 1,750 stories across all 24 partners. So if I'm an editor, I put one person into the project, and I get a lot of content that I can create stories around. So that was one of the biggest things that made a difference. But we have numbers here about our total engagement and our WhatsApp numbers. It's pretty astonishing when you look at what happens when you put all of these pieces of the puzzle together. So 3 key stories. This will take you back to the election. The soy field. This was very early on. Do you remember this one? And the reason I put this up here is this was a very interesting case study to start with, because the question was, had somebody created a huge Bolsonaro in a soy field? And the question was, do we want to amplify that by saying that this is true? Do we just want to say when things are false? Or do we sometimes, when there are people saying, I don't know whether this is true, do we have a responsibility to say, yes, it's true? And we did write a story about this, but there was lots of concerns. But this was... I've taken this from one of our Google Docs that was translated by Daniel or Sergio, I think, where the team spoke to the farmer. He said, yes, it's my soy field. This is what I did. These are my photos, et cetera, et cetera. So by doing this, 24 newsrooms got the benefit. But the team also did some geolocation to try and use satellite imagery to work out where the Bolsonaro letters were. I don't know, you probably can't see this, but at the top, somebody's like, bingo! Somebody else adds the field. Somebody else goes, woo! And then the emoji use by Brazilian journalists was also one of my favorite things. Constant arms, constant fist pumps, constant woo! So I can't speak Portuguese, but I was constantly using Google Translate to understand the WhatsApp messages. But sometimes I didn't need Google Translate, and this was one of those moments. So case study 2, Bolsonaro audio. I'm currently using this example all the time in the United States because everybody's terrified about deep fakes. And I keep saying, don't be terrified of deep fakes, be terrified of audio. And I think it's so easy to create audio that sounds realistic. That's what I'm concerned about for 2020. So I'm sure you remember this. The team went to 2 different experts who did forensic analysis of the audio and did all sorts of clever stuff. This was my favorite one. They identified an accent typical of people living in the interior of Sao Paulo in the speech by focusing on the phoneme R, very much like the Americans' intonation for the R. Who does this work? Very clever people. A second expert identified a sharper pitch in the audio file, different from the tone of Bolsonaro. And this is somebody else. If you are attempting to imitate, your pitch goes up. Anyway, so I use this example all the time in the US to say, do we have forensic experts in the US to do this kind of work? In case study 3, this is the one that everybody's most proud of. This, one of your influencers, talking about Benford's Law, vote rigging. Again, shared Google Doc. This took 10 days of these 24 newsrooms working together. And in the end, to say, making it problematic at best, a forensic tool, and utterly misleading at worst. So this wasn't just kind of, I talk about whack-a-mole debunking. This took 10 days. This was talking to a number of experts. This was doing a deep dive into whether or not a mathematical theory could be used to explain an election. For me, this kind of highlights the type of work that we wanted Comprova to do. We didn't want to be just a site that debunked photos or videos. We wanted to do deep investigations. So, getting to the evaluation. The research questions were many, and it's in Portuguese. But I know these research questions. But we really wanted to understand what was the impact on the journalists that took part in this project? What was the impact on the newsrooms that took part in these projects? What was the impact on audiences? And specifically, we were interested in WhatsApp. So we wanted to do some research just on the WhatsApp data set. And I just want to, I'm an academic by training. One of my frustrations right now is that there's a lot of money being spent at disinformation initiatives. Lots of funders like, oh my goodness, let's just throw money at media literacy. Let's just throw money at journalism projects. We're not doing enough evaluation of what works and what doesn't. And so I'm very happy that many of these results are positive, but they could have been disastrous and said, we actually caused more oxygen, we actually made the Brazilians turn away from the news. We were taking a risk by doing this. But I just say now, we have to be evaluating the work that we're doing. And conversely, we have lots of academics working on these questions, but it's taking 2 years for it to get published because the journal system takes so long. We also can't have that because we are in a crisis. So that's just my little rant as an academic, is that we need quick, rapid response peer review published in a way that is accessible to all. So we had a team of researchers. Could you wave your hand if you are one of them? Where's Guilherme? Down the pub. So Nick Diaz, lovely Nick, who used to work with us at First Draft, he's at Harvard University. He did the audience survey and the experiment. Pedro did the WhatsApp analysis. Angela spent hours and hours and hours looking through 18,000 WhatsApp messages and multiple Google documents. And Guilherme spent hours looking at all of the social media data. They did it for almost no money just because they knew it was important. We worked hours on this. The reason it's taken so long to get this out is because it took so long, but I just wanted to say a huge thank you. We couldn't have done it if you were traditional academics. Shh, Claire's so sassy today. So, the methodology, we had 7 different things that we were doing, including surveys, experiments, content analysis, because we wanted this to be as rigorous as we possibly could be, and we wanted it to be multi-method. So, the results, resultados, so fluent. So the impact on the journalists was positive. Mostly, journalists that were involved said that they found it, they said it was exhausting. Actually, some did reference that it did take a toll mentally, looking at all of this disinformation constantly, that it was very long hours, and it was very intense, and certainly that's something that we need to bear in mind. So it's not that there were no downsides, but people who did take part felt that it was a really positive experience. They felt their journalism was improved, and they said across the board that they had learned new skills. Oh, I'm sorry about that. It says, one person said, newsrooms do not necessarily always have to be competitors. They can work together for a greater purpose. Somebody else said, we were striving to be the most accurate possible. It was something wonderful. I can say I was part of something historical. The quotes were kind of crazy. It was like I'd made them up to sound good. But they were actually just journalists being very positive. I think about doing something different and feeling part of something came through really strongly. The impact on participating newsrooms, it was quite clear that there were new skills in terms of news gathering and verification, And interestingly, quite a number of those newsrooms have now started their own fact-checking or verification project, so it had an ongoing impact. Impact on audiences. Comprova reached a significant percentage of the Brazilian population. Our audience survey, representative of the Brazilian population who use the internet, demonstrated that almost 25% of those surveyed had heard of Comprova. Now, no joke, I nearly fell off my chair when I saw this result. Most brands, for example, a fact-checking organization in the UK that's been around for 7 years, has a 7% share of audience knowledge in the UK. To get 25% in 12 weeks is almost unheard of. It is insane. It's like the man at the airport saying he'd heard of Comprova. And that's because 24 of the largest newsrooms, all talking about the same content, had this huge impact. So let's have a quick maths lesson. Brazilian population, 209 million. 56% of the Brazilian population is online. That equals 117 million people. Therefore, 29 million people had heard of Comprova after 12 weeks. People, this is a population grid. We're about the size of an African country. You are used to big populations. I'm from the UK. I was really excited by that number. So, I'm sorry about this, so they're colouring. A majority of the audience saw Comprova as neutral and trustworthy, provided information they didn't know otherwise, and they used it to inform others. So we did a survey. We actually pushed it out on our social media channels, and the partners also pushed it out. So we had 700 people, but be aware, there's 700 people who are somewhat self-selecting. So either they really liked Comprova or they probably really hated us. But they're the type of people who fill in surveys. So I have to give that caveat. Ooh. Oh no. This looks great on my computer screen this morning. I don't think it's that important. Here's what's important. So you can see these numbers. This is people who believe that Comprova was trustworthy and accurate and fair. Tells the whole story. Now they're pretty good numbers for journalism right now. Certainly in the US, we would struggle to get those kind of numbers. 70% considered Comprova to be ideologically neutral. 78% thought that Comprova gave them information they didn't know previously. And 70% said they shared Comprova content for the purpose of informing others. Now this also maybe go ding, 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 ding. Because this is what we want. We want people to be sharing with other people who trust them, to be sharing that quality information. If you receive information from the BBC or Estado or Globo, it's a brand. You don't have the same relationship with a brand. If it comes from your best friend Martha, you're much more likely to believe it. So that, for me, was also a huge moment when I recognized that we'd done something important. And so we also wanted to test whether or not the reports made a difference with the audience. So we did an experiment online, and we showed that Comprova's reports impacted readers' beliefs. So we took 2 examples, pro and anti-Bolsonaro, and in an experimental setting, we showed the original piece of content, and then we showed the Comprova report. And this is nerdy and academic, but all you need to know is that it moved in the right direction for both of those stories, dependent on what the report said. So in the short term, at least, these reports did have an impact on people's perceptions of that information. And finally, 40% of respondents completely or partially agreed that Comprova helped them to decide their vote in some way. That was not expected. But that's kind of surprising that in many ways people who filled in these surveys are self-selected, but still, the fact that they took this seriously, said it taught them something they didn't know, and potentially impacted their vote is a kind of crazy impact. And finally, and this is Guilherme's work, we actually looked at how we use Facebook and Twitter ads. So we did get credits from Facebook and Twitter. And by using those ads, it helped us reach audiences that weren't normally consumers of mainstream media. So we want to do more work there, but it was really important for us. Our audience grew significantly by having those ad credits. So this is something that we need to do more work on to understand outside the bubble of people who already consume content from 24 of the major newsrooms, how do we reach other people? And finally, WhatsApp messages. This is Pedro's baby. There was a lot of them. So we had API access from WhatsApp. We had, towards the end, about 11 full-time staff just monitoring those messages coming in. It was a massive amount of data coming in from the audience, and we could only get back to them one-on-one. So it just was really time-consuming. I still would do anything to allow, to force WhatsApp to create some kind of broadcast mechanism. They refuse because they say they're an SMS service. But this one-on-one is not sustainable in terms of responding. Also, we found that people loved Comprova. So they were like, hi, Comprova, good morning. We're like, good morning. So, it felt like we were customer service, but we just didn't really have the staff. So we learned so much from this process, mostly that it's just very difficult to do this at scale. So we had in total about 240,000 messages. When we scraped out all the ones that were just hello, love heart, fist bump, there was a lot of those. We have a data set of 105,000 messages that had data attached. So audio, video, image, and text screenshots. Oh, no! Right, everybody look at your books. What page is it on? It's a really good graph. Anyway, when you see it, you'll see that most images, the highest type of content was an image. Audio was the lowest, and then video and text. But when you see that broken down, in the US, people are obsessed with text, and the issue is, what page is it? There's not that page, keep looking. Okay. And also just, it's very quickly, it's worth seeing how much the intake increased towards the campaign's end. And this is partly because we were using Facebook ads to push out the WhatsApp number. But you can see the number of images towards the end went crazy, totally insane. This was the most shared WhatsApp message with us. Just over 1,000 people sent us this image, which is a genuine image of a ballot box, as you can see. But the rumor was the problem. The rumor was that they were pre-ticked for her dad. But that's a genuine image. So I use this again all the time in the US to stop focusing on what's false. Your bigger problem is the way that people take genuine content and then frame it in a way that's weaponized. So this is the exciting announcement. So Pedro, who just is an absolute legend, built this database so that we could actually play around with the data. And Pedro is now just removing, and sometimes people mistakenly sent us messages because they had our number in the phone. I don't think we got really sexy ones, but sometimes people did send us messages they shouldn't have done. So we're making sure that all of that is out of the data set and pictures of a fun dog. But we're hoping by next week that we will be able to make this data set available to anyone. So it's anonymized, it's not the numbers, it's not the text, but you'll be able to see the images, the video, the screenshots, whatever. So this is one of the biggest disinformation data sets on WhatsApp in the world. And we're going to make it available to everybody. So it's very exciting, and I'm really proud that we're able to do that, because the biggest issue about WhatsApp, of course, is we don't know what's inside it. So maybe next year you should be on stage and you can tell us what everybody's found. So if you're interested in getting access to the data, this is the Portuguese version of our Google form with a short link. Remember that the case matters, capital W, capital A, Comprova, BR. And for anybody watching who is potentially an English-speaking person, has everybody got that one? Photos being taken. The English version is that. But we already have interest from academics around the world to access this data set. So I'm pretty excited about what we'll be able to find at the end of this. So finally, again, if before you were like, I'm not interested in this link, but now that sounds so interesting, again, here are the links in both Portuguese and English. And the exciting thing is that we're hoping to build on the first one. And for me, this is the first time we've done a project outside an election. And I've always been saying, disinformation doesn't end on election day. We have huge problems about health and science misinformation, food misinformation, all sorts of other types of problems, but funders and newsrooms get excited about elections, but actually we should be doing this on an ongoing basis. So I think we're going to have a conversation now about what Comprova 2.0 will look like. But if you've got any questions, there is my email. But again, thank you for your enthusiasm for the project, and I'm really excited about what we're going to learn as we continue this. So thank you. Obrigada.
Boa tarde a todos, é um prazer grande estar aqui. Eu sou Adriana Garcia, fui gerente de projeto da primeira edição do Comprova e vou iniciar essa conversa. Essa conversa é muito interessante, porque a gente tem a visão global da Claire de um lado, de todo o ecossistema de desinformação, e do outro a gente tem a Ângela, que acompanhou todo o processo do Comprova de perto, mas não participou da operação. E, no final, entrevistou todos os 24 jornalistas, várias vezes, né, Ângela? 2 vezes, e também analisou todas as mensagens de WhatsApp. Então, a gente tem uma visão bem próxima do que foi o processo interno, e a gente tem, na Claire, uma visão global muito ampla sobre esse ecossistema. E a Claire estava contando para a gente que existem pouquíssimas iniciativas de coalizões de mídia que funcionaram em eleições e continuaram depois. Então, essa é a minha pergunta para a Claire. Quais são os principais desafios e oportunidades que partir para uma segunda versão ou uma continuação de um projeto desses pode trazer? E a importância também.
What a lovely question. So the biggest challenge will be, what do we focus on? Because there's so much misinformation on so many things. Do we just become a set of newsrooms that monitor rumours on WhatsApp? My fear then, it just becomes like a whack-a-mole service where we say, that's true, that's not. I don't think that's as valuable as we could make it. Then if we decide, okay, as a coalition, what are we going to focus on? Is it public policy questions? How do we ensure that we do this in a non-partisan way? How do we ensure that we don't just focus on the content, but we actually look at the motivations and the networks of disinformation, who's funding them, what impact they're having? There's a lot of challenges for us to do this well, but I think if we can do it well, it becomes a model globally for other types of collaborations outside elections.
A Claire citou um exemplo interessante que saiu recentemente no New York Times sobre uma investigação de quem estava financiando as campanhas anti-vacina. Você poderia comentar um pouquinho sobre essa história?
Yeah, so in the United States right now, there's a huge problem with measles outbreaks and a real challenge with lots of misinformation about vaccinations. And it was actually the Washington Post, and they did a deep dive and found that it was one very rich couple from New York that was funding much of the anti-vaccination misinformation online, and it came back to this couple. So how do we do those kind of investigations to understand what and who is behind these kind of campaigns?
Ângela, queria te perguntar, do ponto de vista operacional, a mesma pergunta: que desafios e oportunidades você vê para a continuidade de uma coalizão que estava muito focada num objetivo claro, que era atuar em torno de uma eleição presidencial?
Uhum. Eu vou responder a sua pergunta, só que antes eu queria dizer que há 1 ano a gente estava se perguntando, já com a coalizão formada, se ela ia decolar. Né? A gente tinha uma série de angústias, houve muitos momentos, está ali o Sérgio, está ali o Daniel, também o Marco, Maíra está por aí, a gente tinha uma série de dúvidas, primeiro, se ia ter até coisa para debuncar. Eu me lembro do Daniel, a gente esteve recentemente no Canadá, e ele usou a piada que era o cemitério do Dorico Paraguaçu. E se a gente constrói o cemitério e não tem corpo, e não tem assunto, e tinha muito. Mas houve vários momentos em que a gente teve a greve dos caminhoneiros antes do bootcamp, teve momentos, fazendo a pesquisa para o Comprova, estou vendo aqui também Thaís e a Mônica, que nos deram um apoio voluntário, legal. A gente tinha muito medo de processo, na época, eu não sendo parte da coalizão operacional, mas a gente queria estar protegido do ponto de vista legal. Então, se hoje tudo isso, no retrovisor, parece um sucesso, a angústia já foi muito maior em termos de construção da confiança, do método de trabalho, dos parâmetros, do fluxo desse trabalho, mas eu acho que o nosso maior desafio é lidar com um conteúdo anônimo, que não tem responsabilidade nenhuma, que é capaz de se moldar de formas diferentes. A pesquisa do Pedro mostra, inclusive, confirmando o que a Claire acabou de falar, que eram os cards e os memes, o conteúdo, em termos quantitativo, o mais complicado para lidar, né? Então, eu acho que é a natureza da desinformação o nosso grande desafio. Pensando para o ano que vem, quando a gente tem eleições locais, vocês imaginam o potencial infinito de criar desinformação em 5.570 municipalidades, muito possivelmente todas já com internet, em maior ou menor escala. E como é que o que se aprendeu com o Brasil pode também servir a essa coalizão no ano que vem para lidar com uma eleição mais fragmentada, menos, digamos, era fácil. A gente tinha um foco, que era a eleição presidencial e conteúdo gerado para o usuário. E o ano que vem? É uma grande pergunta. Então, que esse milagre tenha acontecido, que beleza. Mas aí eu queria perguntar para a Claire. Claire, você escreveu algumas vezes em artigos para o Medium que houve momentos em que você achou que não ia nem acontecer o Comprova. Eu queria que você contasse disso e também, na minha opinião, eu nunca falei disso com você, se você concorda que foram os princípios editoriais um momento chave para estabelecer a confiança que a coalizão precisava, aqueles 5 princípios. E também o fato que, dentro da coalizão, todos seriam mutuamente responsáveis. Isso foi muito importante. Era uma coalizão muito, e ainda é heterogênea. Então, você tinha veículos grandes, veículos pequenos, veículos de grandes cidades, TV, rádio. E o que, na minha opinião, enfim, isso aí a gente não perguntou na pesquisa, o que, de certa maneira, alicerçou, vamos trabalhar junto, além do vinho, do bootcamp, do first draft, foi esse fato, que todo mundo estaria vigiando todo mundo e ajudando todo mundo.
Os 5 princípios, só para lembrar aqui, são precisão, justiça e imparcialidade, independência, transparência e responsabilidade ética.
So, yes, I think it's important that we don't forget the journey that we went on to get to this point. And I think the other challenge for First Draft was that we wanted to provide the framework for the Brazilian news industry, but this was your project. And I remember we had calls, I think it was every Wednesday, and we were at the time were in Boston, and we'd use Zoom, and everybody would pop up. And there was this awkward time where we'd try and talk slowly in English, and everybody would try and understand what we were saying. And I think Marco at one point sent me a WhatsApp message saying, go away, they're all being polite because they're trying to speak in English. Just let it go. And I was like, and it was one of the best pieces of advice. And then Sergio came to Boston for some training. And I remember at the time thinking, he's very softly spoken. Is he going to be able to get this coalition of 24 newsrooms together? Turned out this man is a genius. We called him the maestro. And I think that's one thing when I try and talk to funders who say, we want a Comprova. And I say, it's a mixture of the people, the boot camp, the person you pick as the editor. It's such a delicate balance of all of those things. And we provide the framework, and certainly, we came up with those principles, but then we said, do you agree? What would you change in the Brazilian setting? So it was this delicate dance constantly of trying to get that right. But I think I would argue that there was a moment around June where I think we'd come, 2 or 3 times to Brazil, and everybody was very friendly, and they bought us caipirinhas. But I think they were like, who are these outsiders coming down here? What do they know? They're not a newsroom. They don't know what it's like down here. And I think around June, with the May, June, the boot camp, the training, the principles, I think a few people said, no, actually, we can do this, and this is professional. We can actually take this on. This is thoughtful. It's non-partisan. We've been given the training. Let's go. And that, for me, was the turning point. But we had a good 6 months of meetings where it could have fallen apart. Mm-hmm. And we have to remember that.
E silêncio estratégico, gente, também foi aceito. Eu queria que a Claire falasse dessa, strategic silence. We didn't have the piece. Que ela falasse, porque essa é uma questão muito importante, cada vez mais sensível. Como lidar com informação que é danosa e que passe pelo critério jornalístico e que ela não seja, enfim, amplificada. E como fazê-lo. Isso o Comprova fez.
So I do a lot of talks now and training about the challenges of doing journalism in an age of disinformation, because it's providing completely new difficulties for newsrooms. It's always been a case for journalists that more transparency, more sunlight will be the disinfectant. And in many stories, that is the case. But with disinformation, when you have people trying to manipulate the media to report, that's not the case. So you have people desperately wanting newsrooms to do debunks, because that will give this crazy, strange rumor oxygen and some legitimacy, because our brains are lazy and overloaded. So even if you read a debunk, if it is worded irresponsibly, it can do more harm. So one of the really important points for Comprova, I can't remember the numbers, is there was about 30 or 40 stories that the coalition started working on and then collectively decided not to report on. Now that goes against all kinds of journalistic principles. We're meant to shine sunlight, but actually 24 newsrooms collectively said, we've got such a big megaphone that if we report on this, we're going to do more harm. And I would argue that now this is a global issue, that we have to have these kind of coalitions to make those kind of decisions. So I don't know whether this video made its way down here. Did you see the Nancy Pelosi video?
Yeah.
Of the slowed down version of Nancy Pelosi. So Facebook, once it had been fact-checked, deranked that, and so it almost disappeared off Facebook. You could find it if you search for it cleverly enough, but it had been deranked to such an extent. Now, I believe that that was the right decision. What wasn't the right decision was the US media leading with the Nancy Pelosi story for 3 nights running, because that's where all the oxygen came from. And so many people believe there's something about Nancy. Isn't she a drunk? I can't remember the details, but there was something. I think she's a drunk, because our brains are really this, no smoke without fire. So this challenge of how do we report when agents of disinformation are trying to make us report, that's the challenge. And only if you work in a competitive environment, you might say, oh, we won't cover Nancy Pelosi. And then all your competitors cover it. You're like, well, we've got to. No choice, got to. And so, my fear is as we move into the next, well, particularly the US, the 2020 election, that I think the social media networks are becoming much more aware of the importance of taking content out of the recommendation engine, deranking it in the Facebook newsfeed. I think the news media have to say, well, what's our equivalent of deranking? And how do we do that in a way that's not censorship? Yeah. And that's what's really difficult.
Existe tem desafio adicional que é gigantesco também, que é, ok, 25% da população ouviu falar do Comprova, mas e os outros 75%? Né? Que estratégias existem para a gente levar a informação a mais pessoas e também aumentar o nível de confiança delas nas informações? É claro que a metodologia do Comprova ajuda, mas que outras ferramentas você tem visto globalmente com esse desafio de amplificação?
So you're right, the Comprova methodology works because you had 24 newsrooms, but it doesn't reach the people who've already turned off mainstream news. And so that's a problem in Brazil. It's a huge problem in the US, is that you have big portions of the population that don't trust any news media, and they are vulnerable to disinformation. So we need to be thinking much more strategically about how to reach those people, and it might be using targeted Facebook ads. The other piece of the puzzle, particularly in Brazil, is WhatsApp. So I last year had an American tech reporter call me, and she said, why doesn't WhatsApp just, take out the bad content? And I said, well, because they can't see it, it's encrypted. And she was like, it's just like Facebook, isn't it? And I was like, oh, no. And so often you'll see reporters say, social media like WhatsApp. And it's like, WhatsApp isn't social media. WhatsApp is peer-to-peer or small groups to small group. I mean, everybody talks about these big groups, but actually they're not as frequent as small groups of trusted peers. So the challenge is the agents of disinformation have created lots and lots and lots and lots of WhatsApp groups, and this content gets pushed through those WhatsApp groups. We don't have those groups on the journalistic side because that would feel like activism. If we went out and created lots and lots and lots of Comprova groups, then it would make us feel like that's not the role of journalism. But if we don't do that, we don't have a mechanism to push out the quality content. And so, I mean, radio is a huge part of this. I would love, there was just a conference in South Africa with all the fact checkers, and somebody there from, I think, Africa Check, talked about a podcast that they're now pushing out on WhatsApp. So like an audio podcast on WhatsApp with debunks. So how do we think about audio as a mechanism? How do we think about different distribution mechanisms on WhatsApp? How do we talk about more peer-to-peer? How do we just connect with community groups and activists who are with the community and create ambassadors who are trusted in their community to push it out? So for example, in India, people say it's not the kids that are the problem, it's the aunties. It's the older women who are on WhatsApp who are like, well, why, this is so fancy. Why would anybody lie on this fancy phone? And they're the ones who believe everything and are very trusted in their communities. And so how do we reach the aunties of communities to say, no, this is truthful, can you share with your communities?
Eu concordo, eu acho que vai ser, além da própria coalizão agora, essa questão do conteúdo problemático no que as redações precisam decidir, um dilema, porque como é que você, de fato, escapa de ser censura? Como é que você decide? Porque as nossas redações também trabalham individualmente. No âmbito do Comprova já é mais fácil, porque é uma decisão aí colegiada. Quanto a essa questão que a Claire estava falando, do próprio público e da difusão disso tudo, era a minha própria próxima pergunta, que é sobre educação midiática. Você falou em muito dinheiro sendo gasto. Primeiro, o que o Comprova poderia fazer, enquanto coalizão, na sua opinião, a esse respeito, e quais seriam os princípios? Isso é parte, inclusive, de um trabalho que a Claire escreveu para o Conselho da Europa, o Information Disorder, a gente traduziu, adaptou no português para um site que o Projor mantém, que se chama Manual da Credibilidade, mas eu queria que você falasse disso. O que hoje é urgente em educação midiática para tentar atingir os 75% que não conhecem o Comprova e grande parte dos 25% que continuam a acreditar ou distribuir?
So I think your question about principles is an important one. So I suspect you have these in Brazil. Do you have guidelines about reporting on suicide?
Yeah.
Informal. So
Informal.
the kind of guidelines is that you shouldn't repeat the mode that somebody used to take their own life, because lots of psychologists have shown a copycat effect. And just recently, there's now a kind of unofficial guidance not to name a mass shooter in the US and to focus on the victims. So it's not as if we've never had guidelines around how to report responsibly. I just think we need to, as an industry, think about those guidelines in an age of disinformation. And I think one thing we need to do is more training, because if you see something on Twitter and you believe it started on Twitter, you're tempted to just amplify that. If you can track back and see that actually it started in a network of manipulation 2 days earlier in an anonymous WhatsApp group with an attempt to manipulate the media, you are less likely to report on it. So this also goes to understanding how information moves through the media ecosystem. But I do think that this is one of the biggest challenges that newsrooms are facing, this age of disinformation, and it's not going anywhere. We need to stop talking about solutions. This is our new reality. It's like the environment. I've got freckles. When I go out in the sun, I have to wear sunscreen. That's never going to go away. That's just the environment. And that's how we need to think about information disorder. So we need to just think about how do we educate everybody with this level of resilience to help them understand and navigate this space. And journalists are part of that, but civil society is part of that. Politicians are part of that. Teachers are part of that. It's just the new reality. But I do think for newsrooms, it turns on its head everything that newsrooms have been trained to do, which is more transparency, more transparency, more transparency. Well, that has been weaponized by people who are taking advantage of the media. And that's why collectively there needs to be a conversation, which is how do we make sure that we're not getting manipulated?
Uhum. E, gente, eu estou começando a receber perguntas aqui, Dri, queria começar a fazer. Quem quiser mandar, vai no Attendify, busca o meu perfil na página inicial e manda como mensagem. Eu queria, então, perguntar para a Claire, é uma pergunta da Luísa Bodenmiller, eu estou aqui resumindo. Ela está perguntando se os nossos 5 princípios básicos editoriais, guiadores, se o público entendeu, se isso foi parte da pesquisa, e se eles entenderam também que ali o Comprova não era uma redação, mas era uma coalizão de veículos. Eu já posso responder um pedaço, é que isso não foi parte da pesquisa. Essa questão, ainda que os princípios estivessem, ele constassem do site do Comprova.
Queria acrescentar também que se o Sérgio, o editor, quiser fazer alguma pergunta, por favor, porque ele deveria estar aqui, mas ele está afônico hoje, então acho que ele está na programação, por isso que eu me apresentei, eu não expliquei isso. Se quiser fazer qualquer pergunta, você tem seu espaço aqui.
Porque o Daniel já fez, que é a próxima. Por favor, Claire, essa pergunta é da Luísa, sobre os princípios, e se o Comprova era percebido, na sua opinião ou não, como uma coalizão e não um veículo.
Yes. So I don't know where you are, Louisa, but that's an amazing question. Oh.
A pergunta, na verdade, é se o público consegue associar que sentiu mais credibilidade,
Sim, sim.
mais transparência, etc., porque é uma coalizão e não é um veículo A, B ou C que está publicando.
Can you say that in English? Because the translation.
Yeah. She's asking if the perception of Comprova in terms of trust, credibility, could be, let's say, evaluated in terms of being a coalition or vehicles, different vehicles.
Yes, it's a great question, and we did actually run a survey to see whether having more logos under a report made people more trusting of the content. And it failed as an experiment, or we couldn't be sure that people understood what that logo meant, which made us realize we hadn't done a good enough job of explaining how the coalition worked. So I think within these circles, people are like, oh, right, but even it's confusing for journalists. So there was a WhatsApp group and some Google Docs, and then what happened? So I think you're right that in the next phase of Comprova, we probably need to do some kind of behind-the-scenes videos of how this works, why we think it makes it more trustworthy, how journalists holding each other to account, the kind of conversations they're having about improving the coverage. Because I think we were so quick to do it, and then when we tried this experiment, we realized we hadn't done enough. It wasn't easy for the audience to understand what those logos meant. So, yeah.
Outra pergunta, Claire, antes de fazer a pergunta do Daniel, eu me lembro de você falando recentemente dos nossos diferentes, das etiquetas, os labels, que você tinha pensado num modelo bastante nuançado, falso, enganoso, e que as pesquisas estavam dizendo que o que as pessoas retêm é só o falso ou verdadeiro. Se você pudesse comentar sobre isso, sobre o nosso córtex cerebral, o que acontece lá.
So this made me sad. So I have always advocated that we need more complex labels, that we should be more descriptive in our labels. But then when we did experiments on this, Nick Diaz ran these experiments, it was clear that kind of 2 weeks out, people couldn't remember anything other than true or false. And so I think there's still a reason to use those labels in the moment as context. And I think, again, over time, we need to educate audiences about types of manipulation. So let's just take manipulated video for a minute. We actually need to have labels that are used consistently across newsrooms and social platforms that explain manipulation. Is it manipulation by adding something to the video? Is it manipulation by removing something from a video? Is it manipulation by changing the speed, either slowing down or speeding up? Is it manipulation through color? Is it manipulation through sound quality? I mean, there's so many ways that you can manipulate a video. And so in English, we use the word doctored. But actually, if you ask the audience, they don't know what doctored means. So we actually need to start using consistent labels across everywhere so that we can start to educate the audience. And that's not about truth or false. That's just about understanding what works. So, for example, young girls, when I grew up, we were like, oh, those women in the magazines, they're so pretty and thin, because we didn't understand Photoshop. And then we understood Photoshop, we're like, oh, she's probably fat too, but she's got Photoshop. And then we didn't put as much faith in models on, in magazines. And that's how I feel like we have to do the same with manipulated video. We need to get the audience to understand what's possible. And so this week, Washington Post put out a new set of manipulation labels. And I immediately tweeted, have you done any audience research on this? And they were like, no. And I was like, right, this shouldn't be a global standard because we haven't tested it yet. So great that the Washington Post started this, but they used doctored, that's why I was angry. But we need to have consistency globally so we're all using the same labels.
Uhum. E essa pergunta que conversa aí com a sua resposta veio agora do Daniel Bramati. Você acha que devemos ousar em termos de formatos ao apresentar os debunkings ao público? Debunking é quando a gente desmascara. Podemos usar humor quando o assunto permite uma abordagem divertida?
So this is the $100 million question, is how do we ensure that our reports are as engaging as the disinformation? So there's a fact-checking group in Spain who have had huge success in making really ugly debunks. And they use the same lettering, the same aesthetic as the disinformation. And they've had such success that their debunks often get more traffic than the original disinformation. But I suspect many of your newsrooms do not want to start creating really ugly debunks. So we have to come up with what can we do that will work? And I think we haven't tried humor. But how would we do humor with the Benford's Law electoral integrity? I mean, some of this is really serious. But if somebody sees a GIF or a meme or a meme, as you say, which I love, if you see that, then if you then see an 800-word report on Comprova, that's not the same. And in fact, last week I was in a meeting with the World Health Organization, UNICEF, and the Center for Disease Control, and somebody admitted, they said, we're really good at 80-page PDFs, we're terrible at Instagram. And so all of our vaccination stuff is not getting seen because we're terrible at memes. And I was like, yes, you need a meme creator. So the challenge is those of us who work in facts and news, we tend to be serious and we tend to be text-based. Disinformation agents use humor and memes really effectively. And at the moment, the war is not equal, it is asymmetrical. So it's the biggest challenge we have.
Uhum.
Vou acrescentar uma coisinha. E tem um desafio adicional que é como pensar nas idades, né? Porque tem plataformas para pessoas mais jovens, onde elas atuam, como é o caso do Instagram, que você citou, e tem também a questão das pessoas de mais de 50 anos, que provavelmente se conectarão com outros tipos de conteúdo, né? Então, não é uma silver bullet, né? Não é uma solução só. Como é que você vê isso? Porque também requer estratégia de criação e uma série de... A produção de tudo isso é cara, né?
No, and this is brilliant because, again, most of the focus is on young people. But again, young people understand manipulation. In the US, the age group and demographic that most shares misinformation are white men over the age of 60. So how do we reach those people who are spending a lot of time on Facebook and are sharing a lot of content because they are more trusting because they've grown up with gatekeepers? Younger people haven't grown up with gatekeepers, but actually are less trusting of anything because they've been told in school, be careful, don't trust Wikipedia, make sure that you Google this, but be aware that Google doesn't always give you the truth. So we've kind of got different challenges with different age groups. And I worry we're throwing all of this money at media literacy, but we're not doing appropriate evaluation of what's working, what works for different age groups, what works with different platforms. It just needs much more sophistication. And I'd say that's because in 2016, everybody was looking for a quick fix. So I remember we talk about media literacy and people are like, oh, that'll take ages. Let's just tweak the algorithm and we'll be fine. And I think now we've realized this is going to take well, this is our new reality, and so we should start, really taking media literacy seriously and creating a resilient society. And that's a different way of thinking of this. It's not just, media literacy. It's like a resilient society that can withstand constant information pollution.
Uhum. E a próxima pergunta é do Fausto Salvadori, da Ponte Jornalismo. Ele pede que você comente, se aprofundando no caso da desinformação em países como Brasil e Índia, que não está nas redes sociais, mas no WhatsApp. Como fazer chegar a verificação até lá, nesses espaços fechados?
So no, this is a huge challenge. WhatsApp, but there are other platforms. So we're seeing Telegram, WeChat, for example. We just worked with the Australian election. There's a large Chinese diaspora in Australia, and WeChat was really influential there. And we're also seeing, even with Facebook, Mark Zuckerberg has talked about this pivot to privacy, which is, he already sees the numbers on the Facebook newsfeed are going down. More people are spending time on Facebook Messenger and WhatsApp and Instagram direct messages. And so this is part and parcel of a chilling effect on speech. So over the last 2 years, we've had a number of pieces of regulation, or the threat of regulation, which would punish people for sharing misinformation. And because of that, we're seeing people move into encrypted spaces. So it's understandable why that's happened, but to whoever asked the question, that means we can't see what's being shared in these spaces unless people send us those tips. And so how we fight that, we go back to, we need to have a relationship with the audience so they feel part of this process. I think newsrooms, we know this, newsrooms have tended to say, we're the experts, we will tell the stories and the audience will passively consume our clever content. I think we know that that's not the answer, and it's about having an engaged relationship with the audience, but that's going to become even more important when people are relying on these closed spaces and each other for information. So when we look at countries that have particularly low levels of trust, and Brazil, one of the reasons we wanted to work in Brazil was watching the trust level in Brazil just drop off a cliff. And in places like Indonesia that have low levels of trust, if somebody sees something on WhatsApp or Facebook Messenger they don't believe, they don't go to the local media or to Wikipedia or to Google. They go to another WhatsApp group with their friends and say, does anybody know if this is true or not? So my fear as we move into these closed spaces is that people will just rely on each other to say, is this true? And actually we're moving away from trusted gatekeepers like the media. And I just am terrified that that will happen in a place like Brazil and the US, even the UK. I mean, we're not that far as we see trust dropping of people just turning to one another. And as we know as humans, when people say, what do you trust? You trust people who tell you what you already want to hear. So this is live streaming, but I'm just going to say it. Fox News, fair and balanced, very, very highly trusted in America. Many people would argue that Fox News isn't fair and balanced and comes from a particular perspective, but it is trusted by people who, when they hear that information, they trust it. It's like, oh, I think that, therefore it's true. So when people throw around the word trust, I'm always like, oh, be careful, because trust is often when you get information that you like. So the people that we like to spend time with in WhatsApp are the people who already think the ways that we do. And so my fear is that we go into this space where we're encrypted spaces with other people who think the same as us. We're reinforcing each other's ideas. And then we're just in a hellscape.
Então, Claire, a pergunta agora é do Marco Túlio Pires, do Google News Lab. Oh, sure. A pergunta é do Marco Túlio, do Google News Lab, e ele está perguntando, imagino ele fez a pergunta no plural para a Adri também. Como vocês pensam nas formas de engajamento do Comprova com outras publicações que talvez não estejam numa posição para se comprometer com a coalizão, mas que poderiam reproduzir o conteúdo? Há discussões sobre como incorporar o modelo de broadcasting para ampliar o alcance? Há também planos para engajar com influenciadores não tradicional, tipo youtubers, celebridades, etc. Antes de passar a resposta para a Claire, eu queria fazer aqui um disclaimer que o Marco, representando o Google, como a Maíra, eles não interferem no projeto. O projeto é dirigido, guiado pelas próprias redações. Então, ele está perguntando, de certa maneira, como alguém externo a essas decisões.
No, that's true. He doesn't interfere. Apart from that very good WhatsApp message, which was, "Go away, Claire." Oh, yes. So this is the key. I mean, I would say the one thing we didn't do as well with Comprova, but we would have done with more money, is to have really created quality viral content that we knew that would go far and wide. So if we had got a really good creative agency to work pro bono with us and made incredibly strong professional viral content, I wish we'd done that. But we should be connecting with YouTube influencers, we should be connecting with celebrities, but we should also be connecting with civil society working on the ground, who understand their audiences and understand the type of content that their audiences would want. So my hope is, when we relaunch Comprova, we're not going to get it right immediately, but I love that we don't just have 12 weeks. I mean, the 12 weeks of Comprova, you can't move an election. You know, when we were struggling with our crappy website, I was like, I need another 6 months. Can we move the election? No. So the problem with elections is you've got a very finite. If this is forever, then we can do all sorts of things and we can test different things. And I still really, 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 really want a storyline in a soap opera, a telenovela. Like that will be in my life's work done if we can get that.
A gente vai trabalhar nisso, Claire. O que a gente pode dizer é que a nossa intenção de transformar o conteúdo sob a licença Creative Commons foi a intenção de dizer para os outros veículos de mídia, influenciadores e qualquer pessoa da comunidade, que o conteúdo era disponível e poderia ser republicado desde que citada a fonte, né? Talvez a gente não teve tempo de promover isso. A gente cogitou, na época, até de fazer uma coalizão de veículos que pudessem republicar ou se comprometessem a republicar, mas foi tudo muito rápido, como a Claire disse, a gente não teve tempo de articular isso e liberou a licença como uma maneira de dizer, nós, como uma coalizão, acreditamos que esse é um serviço público, praticamente com uma missão cívica, e, portanto, o conteúdo está e estará disponível a todos os veículos de comunicação do Brasil. Então, essa é a primeira coisa. A segunda é que, aqui contando um pouco de bastidor, houve preocupações em fazer um trabalho mais próximo com influenciadores, embora a gente reconheça que eles são vozes importantes em suas comunidades e tenham muito alcance, é que havia uma precaução de, bom, mas e se a gente fizer um trabalho mais próximo com influenciadores e, no meio da campanha, eles anunciam que estão apoiando determinado lado, como é que nós ficamos? A gente quer navegar esse processo com o máximo de equilíbrio e isenção possível. Então, havia essa preocupação também, e isso foi colocado em várias reuniões. A gente fez um tipo de trabalho com alguns influenciadores, que a gente teve uma agência que também nos ajudou pro bono a tentar identificar alguns influenciadores que a gente acreditava que teriam preocupação mais educativa com o público. E a gente chegou a fazer um trabalho de abordá-los. E o aprendizado do pouco material que saiu via influenciadores é que eles também precisam ter uma abordagem de educação midiática da coalizão, ou seja, há sim um potencial enorme de influenciadores das mais diversas plataformas receberem conteúdo do Comprova e usarem isso como material básico para produzir os seus conteúdos com a intenção de informar, com uma intenção cívica também. Então, isso, com certeza, está no nosso radar e a gente deve também trabalhar, se possível, com essas audiências, porque, com certeza, são eles que conversam com comunidades específicas, com idades específicas e com interesses específicos.
Bom, e a próxima pergunta, então, é da Sara Teófilo, do Popular, ela é repórter lá, e ela pergunta sobre o First Draft. Queria saber se vocês têm algum outro trabalho no Brasil ou a intenção de fazer algo como foi feito com Comprova, com outras redações.
So, thank you for. It's hard when you don't know who's asked the question, so I'll just look around. So, yes. So, in terms of First Draft, what we're trying to do now is we have requests from countries around the world to do a Comprova. The challenge we have is you can see these projects are not cheap, and it's hard to, everybody wants one of these, but unless we had a bottomless check, we actually can't do this. So we're currently trying to work on a model where we would have one platform that almost any journalist around the world could join the platform, start an investigation, and anybody else could help with that investigation. So if it's about an Ebola outbreak in West Africa, you would have a number of different journalists from West Africa working together. Or if you had a story here that Brazilians were reporting, for example, with the fire for your museum, you might have London journalists saying, well, that's useful, can we play on that? So it's very, very ambitious, but it's partly because we can't keep doing these projects country by country. It's just not manageable. So that's one of the things we're doing. And the other thing is just having consistent training for anywhere in the world. And so we're developing what we're calling a digital investigation certificate of excellence, so that if you're a journalism student, you can say that you have passed a certificate, or if you work in a newsroom, because we're trying to create standards for journalists who really have had this training, signed up to these kind of principles. So we're hoping that we could bring them to J schools across Brazil. We would love to work with more newsrooms across Brazil. So there's such a hunger for this work. I mean, I have to say personally, the thing that you care about, when it becomes the thing that so many other people care about, I wake up every morning and I pinch myself. But I also feel like we can't do enough quickly enough. So we're constantly trying to find mechanisms to scale our work. So yeah, any ideas, we would love to hear that. But for me, it's about training current journalists, the next generation of journalists. And my dream also is to help audiences navigate this. I really do believe that it's not just journalists who need this, but I need to make sure that we don't fall over. But there's so much work around the world. This problem is not going away. But I'd love to do more in Brazil. So any ideas, let us know.
Só para avisar que também no site do First Draft existem cursos em português. De 1 hora, que é aberto a todo mundo, e um mais aprofundado, que tem 5 unidades, que você precisa preencher um formulário, e eles enviam o link para você, e você pode se aprofundar no estudo de verificação a partir desse curso. Posso acrescentar também que é uma preocupação da coalizão, a gente teve reunido ontem, em amplificar os esforços de educação de jornalistas e da comunidade em geral, dos cidadãos em geral. Então, com certeza, está na pauta, né, Bramati, né, Sérgio? A gente continuar conversando com todos para elaborar essas iniciativas que envolvam mais redações, envolvam as pessoas em geral.
Uhum. Bom, e aí a pergunta agora é do Rodrigo Ronhart, nosso parceiro do SBT. Ele pergunta, Claire, como é que você viu a participação de TVs como a Band e o SBT na difusão dos desmentidos, dos debunks?
So my friend at the airport, he had seen it on television. So no, I mean, I've loved having the television component. And halfway through the project, I think, again, Marco on WhatsApp sent me a link and said, look at the numbers on this. And I think it was a banned broadcast. And of course, I come from a much smaller country than Brazil, so the UK. And just to see the numbers that you guys get is just mind-boggling. And I do think we can focus on these projects as, they're just digital projects. And I think the thing I loved about Comprova is the television broadcasters decided what works for TV, the radio guys said what works for radio, the print guys said what works for print. So what I loved about this was it was the reporting at the core, and then the partners made a decision about what works for your audiences. It wasn't that we said, you have to produce this. But I think TV and radio is still so important. And I think in the conversations about disinformation, I'm saying this from a US perspective, the tech press goes after the social platforms, and they're not perfect. There are issues there, but there are also issues with mainstream media, because we still have huge audiences. So that's why there is a responsibility to get it right. But there is an ability to meet many, many people who aren't on Facebook, and then certainly not on Twitter, which is where journalists sit. So for me, it's critical that we have those in the partnership.
Tá. Então, eu tenho 2 perguntas, vou fazer de uma vez. A primeira do Sérgio e a segunda do Daniel. A primeira do Sérgio Ludic. como os meios de comunicação que se fecharam com a adoção do paywall para garantir sua sustentabilidade podem colaborar com a depuração do ambiente informativo. Você vê esse fechamento como um problema? E o Daniel também pergunta sobre o Civic, que você, enfim, depois que deixou o Centro Schornstein em Harvard, foi para o Civic, que é mantido pelo TED, para você falar do que você está fazendo.
So in terms of the paywall question, this is a really, really important one, which is, of course, newsrooms need paywalls in order to survive, and that's just part and parcel of the current news ecosystem. The problem is, I worry that that's meaning that fewer and fewer people can access quality information. And on the flip side, you have WhatsApp, and in this country, because of zero basics, free basics, people don't have to use data to use Facebook or WhatsApp. That's quite a balance. So on one hand, you have to pay to access quality information. On the other hand, here you go, you can have it for free. And so what I would love about if Comprova could continue is, of course, you should still subscribe to all of the individual news outlets. But what does it mean around really critically important information around public policy that says all Brazilians can access that for free? Like, that would be my dream, that Comprova is a place that you can access quality information from the major players that doesn't compete with the other reporting, but on certain issues that could be influenced by disinformation, every Brazilian has a chance to access it. So that would be my dream. And the last question about TED was, I went to TED as a fellow to see if there was something that we could to do together around these things, a level that, I mean, TED has a huge reach, but that fellowship is shortly coming to an end, and I'm going back to First Draft full-time. There's too much work, Sergio. So yeah, so I'm going back to First Draft full-time.
Are you going to London? Você está voltando para o First Draft em London, em Londres?
Oh, no, so our headquarters is in London. We have about 14 staff there. And then there's 3 of us in New York, and there's 2 people in Sydney. We would like to open a bureau potentially here or Buenos Aires, but really here.
Here?
Both, my hope. But yeah, I mean, we realize we shouldn't be parachuting into countries. We should be supporting centers and universities. My dream is that we would have bureaus around the world at journalism schools with local content, local professors, local journalists. So that's my vision.
Uhum. Bom, queria agradecer. Thank you, Claire. Obrigada, Ângela. Queria chamar o Bramati ao palco novamente, porque a gente tem uma foto para tirar. E ele vai fazer um rápido anúncio aqui.
Na verdade, ela está me passando o microfone para eu chamar todo mundo que está envolvido com o novo Comprova para vir ao palco e tirar a nossa foto histórica como no ano passado. Por favor, subam. E eu... Só uma pausa na música. Uma pausa pequenininha. Esse é um projeto de jornalistas que envolve veículos, que envolve empresas, mas é um projeto que envolve pesquisadores, tem um lado acadêmico e tudo, mas a gente não conseguiria sem o fantástico apoio que a gente está tendo dos nossos patrocinadores, que são o Facebook e o Google, o Facebook Journalism Project, o Google News Initiative. Agora, o próprio WhatsApp vai nos apoiar também. E a gente agradece muito. Sem vocês, nós não teríamos feito o Comprova 1. E, graças ao entusiasmo com que vocês abraçaram o Comprova 2, a gente vai fazer mais uma jornada pelo mundo da desinformação. Muito obrigado. Música agora, por favor.